Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be doing a review of the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy. This is going to be quick, it's going to be fairly disordered because I'm just kind of going to be going back and forth. This series I picked up unexpectedly because I'd heard quite a lot about the first book called Guild. It was very short, very easy to get through, and I thought, okay, this is like fairly average as a fantasy romance series goes. And then I just kind of kept reading the books because I was kind of curious about one of the characters. There's 5 books in total, 4 books are out, the 5th book is coming out later this year. So I will definitely be reading it because I'm very curious as to how it's going to wrap up. This series is pretty underwhelming though. This is not going to be a rave review. I read it because I just needed something quite light as I was reading some other heavier stuff. And there's one character, which is the love interest, the main love interest, that I found really interesting because he's very different to a lot of the love interests that you get in these types of books. Well, I wouldn't say he's very different. He's somewhat different. And I just thought he was quite a compelling character. The writing is so easy to read that you can read these books very quickly. I read the 4th book, which is like 800 pages in like 2 days because they are so quick and easy to read. You don't really need to think. It's just written so colloquially that you can just get through it super quickly, in my opinion. And I kind of liked it for that. I think they're good palate cleansers. Let's just jump into my somewhat disordered review. The first 3 books aren't great. The 4th book is the best one. I gave the first 3 like 3 stars each. I feel like they could have been a lot more refined in a way, but I really like the 4th one in comparison to the first 3 because I think the plot really picks up and I think the characters are really well defined by that point. I think they should have been defined by book 2, in my opinion, at least the main character. But they felt defined by book 4, and I was like, okay, I can actually understand these people now and not like be bored by their motivations, if that makes sense. But the male love interest I was the main motivation for me to keep reading because there's stuff about him, I'm not going to go into it because I don't want to spoil it. There's stuff about him that I just thought was interesting. Like, I just think he's quite a compelling character and I'm just very curious to see where his arc goes by the end of the series. The main character, Orin, is very annoying. Just like romance, fantasy protagonists, for me, like, I generally find them all very annoying and they're all very one-dimensional. They all tend to have the same arc, and this book is the same as a lot of other new adult fantasy romance series. She's not different at all. Like, you could literally change her name with any other fantasy romance main character and like they're all the same basically. I liked the world surrounding her in a sense. Like, I liked what was happening outside of her, that even though the story is told from her perspective, because we're getting these other layers, I was like, okay, it's not like the end of the world. There are occasional chapters that you get from other characters too, but you don't really get them enough to really justify them as like main characters by any means, at least not in the first like 2-3 books. I mean, I think the cast is okay. Like, it's okay. Like I said, the main love interest was my main motivation for carrying on, but everybody else was like meh, and the main character was pretty annoying. The romance is a big part of this as the series goes on. It's not a big part of the first one, in my opinion, though there is a romance element, but a big part of this series is this idea of like self-discovery and self-acceptance and like being able to put aside your insecurities or work through your insecurities to become the person that you're meant to be. And I quite like that. Like, I think it's a good message. I think it's a good thing to talk about. I think it's a very similar theme in a lot of fantasy in general, but also particularly romance fantasy, when these kind of young women are put into positions where they're not necessarily at their best, but then they kind of go through this journey of kind of figuring themselves out. It's not exactly original, but I didn't hate it. Like, I liked it. I thought it was all right. Like, I think she executed it generally quite well. There's a lot of smut as the books go on, especially books 3 and 4. I did not like it. I'm not against smut in general, but I did not like it at all. There's a lot of like bits that just made me feel quite gross in a way, and like that I just thought were really embarrassing, and that like, I don't know, like nobody would say these things. I don't know, maybe they do, but it just didn't gel with me. It's not the kind of smut that I like personally, and I just there's a lot of it as well, and it was just unnecessary. Like, smut, in my opinion, should have a place, and I think often it's just kind of used as a way to, I don't know, detract from the main story. I don't know whether that's done intentionally or not, but I just wasn't a fan. I just was not a fan. I did like some of the angst and the tension in book 2, but books 3 and 4, the smut really comes into play, and I was like, nah, this is just not for me. I skipped a lot of it actually. Trigger warnings is maybe something that I should talk about. The first book has a really graphic sexual assault scene at the end of the book. If you want specifics, let me know and I can tell you the chapter, but it's very graphic, and if you get triggered by that, I'd skip it entirely. There isn't much more after that. I think that's the most kind of graphic part of the entire series. But there's a lot of swearing, there's a lot of like kind of crass language. So if you don't like that or you're sensitive to that, then probably stay away from this because there's a lot of that. For me, it doesn't really, I mean, I read a lot of this type of stuff like crass language and stuff, so I'm quite used to it. If you're quite young or if you're just getting into romance fantasy, then I think maybe this one is quite heavy or heavier than some of the other romance fantasy series out there. Maybe not the best place to start, but just be aware of that going into it. Oh, the sun is coming out. Woohoo. Just going to move my head. There we go. This isn't really a review, but I just feel like I needed to say something about it because I read 4 books, and the first book is like 300-400 pages. The second book is like 300-400 pages. The third book is like 600 or 700, and then the fourth book is like 800. So I've read a lot of pages, and I was like, I want to say something, and I'm just curious whether anybody else feels very meh about this series. A lot of it was just okay. It wasn't underwhelming, it wasn't overwhelming, it was just whelming. It's not a word. There's just not tons going for it, aside from like a few very like minor things and like one character, in my opinion. Whenever I look up this series, all I see is just insane praise, and I'm like, why? I don't get it. So if you're a fan, I'm really curious, like, what is it that resonates with you? Like, what do you love about it? Like, because I'm genuinely curious, because for me, it just didn't, like I said, it was just, a lot of it was just okay. A lot of it was just like very bang average, and like meh. And I just, it's not very memorable in my opinion. Like, I don't even really remember like tons of stuff. I mean, I remember like the main beats and like the main things that happen, but it was just kind of like, I finished it and I was like, oh, okay. I wonder where this is going to go in book 5. Because I feel like not a lot happened in the first 3 books, and then like everything happened in the 4th book as well. Should you read the first 3 books just to get to like a decent 4th book? I don't think so. Like, I don't think that's fair on the reader to have to go through all of that just to then get to a decent book. But anyway, like I said, I'm not like a big fan of this book, but everybody that I've seen on YouTube loves it, and like Goodreads, so many high reviews, and I'm like, I don't understand. Like, am I missing something? I feel like I'm missing something, and I want someone to tell me what I'm missing. It's also entirely possible that this book and this series is just not for me, which is entirely okay. But I've liked romance fantasy before, and I have to say, recently though, I've had like very, very poor experiences. So it is possible that my reading experience has just changed, and this is just not my thing anymore. But anyway, I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Like I said, I gave the first 3 books 3 stars each. And then I gave the 4th book like a 3.75/4 stars. I just kind of rounded it up. I will read the 5th book when it comes out, I think in the summer. So I am very curious to see how she's going to wrap up like the whole thing in one book. I'm assuming it's going to be pretty chunky, so that's going to be fun. Let me know down below what you think. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.